Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the South Donetsk direction, where the Ukrainians continue suffering significant losses, and most likely during the next few weeks the Russians will be able to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to force them to not just to fall back but to run away as far as possible, even behind the city of Karova. But this is going to happen obviously not today but during the next few weeks. As for the situation on the 31st of August, there are a few important statements that I would like to share with you. First of all, I would like to remind you that there are three core brigades that are responsible for the defense of this direction. We are talking about the 79th Air Assault Brigade that was responsible for the cities, the villages of Konstantinovka, Paraskovyevka, but according to information we have, this brigade was completely defeated, and even before the beginning of the battle for Konstantinovka, the sources from this brigade stated that the Ukraine commanders, decided after the battle of Konstantinovka to remove this brigade from the line of combat contact. And most likely this is exactly the process that is happening right now. The Ukrainians are redeploying and removing the forces of 79th Brigade as far as possible from the line of combat contact with the purpose to restore its combat capabilities. The next brigade is the 33rd Mechanized Brigade that was involved in clashes with the Russians, but mainly for the fields between the cities of Maximilianovka, Pobeda and Konstantinovka itself. So the area of their responsibility are the fields. And we are coming to the most important brigades. The third one is the 72nd Mechanized Brigade, which is responsible for protection of the city of Ugledar, the village of Vadiane, the coal mines, so basically over this defense belt. And today we got two important statements from two completely independent sources that the forces of the 72nd Brigade of the Ukraine Armed Forces was withdrawn from the Ugledar direction and is being transferred to the Kursk area. As for withdrawn from Ugledar direction, I agree with this. I believe that this is exactly the situation that is happening right now, but I'm not sure that Ukrainians are transferring this brigade to the Kursk region. So this has no sense. This redeployment has no sense. And this report was stated by the Russian sources, by pro-Russian sources. As for pro-Ukrainian sources, we have additional update, and according to a very highly ranked government officer of Ukraine, Syrsky is taking the 72nd Brigade from Vuhledar, which repelled all attacks there for 2 years and knows the area very well. And this report was stated by People's Deputy of Bezugla. According to her, it will be a disaster as with Toretsk and New York when the 24th Brigade was taken from there. So according to information we have, the Ukrainians are planning to redeploy the 72nd Brigade, maybe to to restore its combat capabilities. But if you ask my opinion, I believe that Ukrainians are planning to redeploy the 72nd Brigade right now towards the cities of Bogayavlenka and the city of Novoukrainka, with the purpose to give this 72nd Brigade additional time to prepare defense belt that goes from between the cities of Shakhtarskaya, this is the city of Shakhtarsk, then the city of Novoukrainka, Bogayavlenka and Ganovka. So this 72nd is going to prepare defense belt before the Russians are able to completely establish complete control over Ugledar to defeat the Ukrainians and to get this line. So this is like attempt to save the situation in the future. And meanwhile, the forces of defense brigades and different separate battalions like 36th Rifle Battalion, like Skala Assault Battalion, like 216th Battalion of the Territory Defense Brigade will take all their fire of Russian army on themselves and will try to slow down the Russians as long as possible. So this is maybe like ideal plan that Ukrainians have right now, but who tells them that this plan is going to work? Who tells them that all these battalions are able to slow down and hold the Russians as long as possible? Who tells them that the Russians are not able to break the Ukrainian defense belt within a few days and to get the completely unprepared line during the next few hours? So nobody can tell them, nobody can give them this 100% guarantees. Now let's move to the Pokrovsk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation in the vicinity of Karlovka. Just yesterday we have colored the territory. Around Karlovka and Karlovka itself in Russian favor. During the previous 48 hours, we got a lot of geolocations, a lot of videos how the Russians were moving along Karlovka without any resistance from the Ukrainian side, how the Russians were raising the flag. More precisely, the forces of 114th Brigade of the Armed Forces of Russian Federation. And based on all these videos, video, we have adjusted the map. And we were expecting that the Russians, of course, would continue moving further in the southwestern direction, but nobody could project, nobody could even think about that the Russians are able to capture the next village just within the next few hours, 12 hours more precisely. And starting off today, we got a lot of reports about the situation in the village of Halytsynivka, the village of Dalinovka, and the farms to the south of Karlovka. Let's start from the farms. The Russian sources published the video how they raised the flag over the abandoned positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. This video confirms complete control over this territory, and this video confirms that the Russians are moving further. Also, a little bit later, we got additional updates from different mappers, including pro-Ukrainians, and according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians managed to reach the outskirts of Halytsynivka, but not to enter the village. So this report was posted yesterday in the evening, and later we got additional confirmations from different mappers, including pro-Russians. But as for pro-Russian sources, today somewhere at 8 a.m., at 7-8 a.m. of the local time, the Russian sources published the map, additional map, that the Russians, as a result of clashes, managed to establish complete control over Halytsynivka and to enter the outskirts of Dalinovka. So this is Dalinovka, the village of Dalinovka, and this is the village of Halytsynivka. So I'm telling the truth, right before we start making the video, most of these territories were colored in gray and were considered as contested area. But right before I start making the video, like few seconds before, we got another video from most likely 114th Brigade of Armored Motorized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Russian Federation. And in this video we can see how the Russians freely enter the central part of the city and raised the Russian flag. So currently we have no doubts that the Russians are moving further, that the Russians establish complete control over the village, and most likely nothing can stop the Russians from further progress in the southeastern, south and southwestern direction. The Ukrainians, as you can see, suffer significant problems. And most likely, now the Ukrainians have one goal, not even to stabilize the situation. Currently, nobody thinks about the stabilization of the situation. Currently, everybody thinks about one thing: how to save as many as possible manpower, how to avoid encirclements, how to access sometimes cauldrons, and many other topics. So, as you can see, the situation for the Ukrainians, especially for those forces who are currently located between these fields, is becoming vital and critical. Ukrainians need to begin running away, not withdrawing their positions, but running away from this territory as soon as possible, and they should have started doing this already, and they should started this already yesterday and maybe a week ago. If they haven't started doing this yet, then there are very high chances that these Ukrainians can be encircled and appear in a cauldron. So this is the situation, and once again, let's make some projections a little bit. So according to this progress, according to latest geolocations, most likely the Russians are going to continue moving along the road between Girnik and Mikhailivka, so Selidova, and they will try to take under control everything that goes right exactly in this area and this small polygon that I'm adding on map. So all these territories most likely would be captured by the Russians during the next 24-48 hours, and then the main battle for the next defense belt is going to start. And as for the next defense belt, we are talking about the line between the cities of Zaryana, Girnik, Ukrainsk, then to the western direction of Selidova, and then from Selidova to Dachinsky, and from Dachinsky to Mirnograd. So this is the next defense belt where Ukrainians will try to slow down the Russians as long as possible. But if the Russians are able to go through this defense belt, this yellow line, then nothing will be able to stop the Russians probably until the Dnipro River. On the other hand, the Ukrainians continue redeployment of their forces, and during the previous 24 hours we got a lot of changes on the ground. We have some forces of 14th Operational Brigade Chervona Kalina, we have some additional regiments, we have redeployed back 47th Mechanized Brigade, we have 31st Mechanized Brigade, we have a lot of forces were redeployed back by the Ukrainians with the purpose to stabilize the situation, not to allow the Russians to complete the flawless victory over the Ukrainian soldiers in this Pokrovsk direction. And of course, the Russians continue their super offensive operation. They continue moving further and deep inside of the territory of Ukraine. Their FPV drone operators, the Russians control the roads, the Russians control everything. And as they see something comes in this direction, the Russians destroy it immediately with another FPV drone attack. So additional batch of videos we got of how the Russians were hunting and destroying not just vehicles, but also communication equipment, different satellite equipment, and many other important infrastructural objects that Ukraine has been using to, let's say, slow down the Russians. But nothing, as we can see, nothing can do this. And as for Selidova itself, for the previous, as you can see, for the previous 36 hours, already 36 hours, we haven't received anything about this. We haven't received anything about further additional Russian progress. So which confirms that the Russians stopped. Maybe they were stopped because of due to Ukrainian concentration of forces, or maybe the Russians stopped until they are able to secure and to clear and to finish the battle for this part of the Pokrovsk-Kurakhova directions. Furthermore, the sources reported that Ukrainians intensified the evacuation process from the city of Kurakhova itself. So this is obviously going to be one of the objectives of the armed forces of Russian Federation. Now let's move to the Toretsk agglomeration, and as for this territory, we have lots of very interesting pictures. Yes, we have lots of fire anomalies. For example, in this picture, we can see a number of fire anomalies all over the entire New York and Toretsk, and the most important fire anomaly is coming from this part. So something is happening here, and maybe this is something like an evidence that confirms that there are still Ukrainians in this small cauldron in this industrial zone. As for Toretsk, the city is under very heavy fire. The Russians are bombing this territory 24 hours, 7 days a week, but as you can see, it's already a 7th or let's say a 3rd or 4th or 7th day in a row without any additional progress on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians tried to conduct a series of counterattacks with the purpose to restore control over the citadel that located in the eastern part of the Toretsk. This video confirms that the Russians control the stronghold, and the Russians have strong control over the stronghold, and the Ukrainians made an attempt, and as you can see in this video, the Ukrainians, around 11 soldiers, 11 stormtroopers landed in this area, and in the final part of the video we can see that just 5 or 6 managed to evacuate. So 5 of them were left or abandoned between these buildings. Chasiv Yar, nothing special, just a regular activity, as well as the Sivers direction. And of course, important updates continue coming from the northern Kupiansk direction, where the Russians continue offensive operation, and according to different sources, the Russians managed to physically cut the road between the city of village of Berestova and the city of Kruglyakivka. So this information was confirmed by different mappers, including pro-Russian mappers and pro-Ukrainian mappers. So once again, in summarizing everything, as a result of offensive and clashes, offensive operation, the Russians managed to cut the road between Berestova and Kruglyakivka physically. The Ukrainians lost their supply road, and now we see that the Russians are trying to create another cauldron for the Ukrainians and for the Ukrainians who are currently located in this area. So most likely, due to this configuration of the line of combat contact, we should expect additional attempts to attack from the Russian side already from the village of Stelmakhovka. I'll remind you that just a few days ago the village was captured according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. Later this information was confirmed by by video. In this video we can see the Russians that raised the flag in the central part of the village. So another cauldron can maybe created by the Russians between Berestova, Pishan and Stelmakhovka. We don't know the exact number of Ukrainians that can get there, but maybe 1,000 or maybe something like this. And as for the Kursk direction, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received any changes on the ground. The Ukrainians are digging in deeper, trying to slow down the Russians, trying to hold the lines and hold the positions they managed to capture during that offensive. I'm not sure that Ukrainians are able to do this because Syrskyi and Zelensky realized that the European countries are not going to authorize them to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia. So that's why they decided to stand and to hold the lines as long as possible and to begin the redeployment process back to the Pokrovsk direction. The question is whether the Ukrainians have enough of time to complete the process. On the other hand, the Ukrainians continue bombing and attacking the city of Belgorod. And this is a crime, this is a military crime. In this video we can see how the Ukrainians were bombing and attacking the city of Belgorod with multiple launch rocket systems. The sources reported that Ukrainians were bombing the city with the Vampires of Recharge production, and in this moment we can see the explosion and attack of that system. We have photos, a lot of fire anomalies all over the entire city, and of course a lot of casualties. According to information we have, there are, let's say, 46 people suffered as a a result of Ukrainian multiple launch rocket attack. So the situation is very, very bad. On the other hand, we see that the United States of America is not going to stop the war. According to information we have, by the end of the year, the states are planning to increase the production of 155 millimeter artillery rounds to 36,000 per month, and in the next year they're planning to double this number twice. So this is the situation, and that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.